So what we thought we would do is just do a slightly different format from what Paul is doing. And I would like, particularly as this theme of this panel is about how to position yourself and describe your agency, I'm going to start by asking each of the panelists to spend 2 minutes either talking or showing something that reflects the character or the special quality of their agency. And we're going to do it one by one. Nitin Mantri from Avian Media in India, Eduardo Vieira from Ideal in Brazil, Lisa, who I mentioned just before now, from Airfoil, and lastly, to keep us on the straight and narrow, we have Kathy Krebs, that many of you will know from the US Council of PR Firms, who's not going to talk about the council, but about how the council is advising clients better on choosing agencies in a more professional way. Nitin, I'm going to start with you and ask you to say or show a little bit about Avian.
Okay, I've got a video, and then just to wrap up, we started really focused on the aviation and defense sector in 2004. So it's been about 8 years now since we started the firm. Today we are about close to 100 people across 6 offices in India. Yeah. And I think what the video really shows is our transition from really hardcore B2B to technology and to consumer entertainment in the last 1 year. And not only transition from B2B to kind of consumer, but also from traditional public relations to digital and government affairs.
Pass it along. Eduardo Vieira from Ideal in Brazil.
Yeah, I'd like to start with a video as well. Could you please run it? Yeah, well, this is actually a business case that explains a little bit the way Ideal works. Actually, have in Brazil a very peculiar situation in terms of broadcasting rights. And it's a thing that it's a monopoly from a local network. And ESPN has suffered from being considered just an American sports network. And so our strategy to change this was to achieve audience through social networks and using the official fan page and the Twitter channel to transmit all the events, including the ones ESPN didn't do rights to broadcast. And so the results that was the ones that was showed in the video. But besides that, we actually put some innovative tools to make the broadcast almost the same as the Facebook or Twitter coverage. So it is something that it's completely innovative for Brazilian standards. And for instance, or for example, to use hashtags and tweet cams during the TV broadcast. And so that explains how we work. Our idea is to influence, to engage, or activate the audiences in a way to make the public or change their behavior or their attitudes concerning a company, a brand, or their products. And so Ideal is the first agency in Brazil to work with these 3 elements and with earned, owned, and paid media as well. And this is the way we work.
The way of the future, the ideal agency.
Yeah, I don't know.
Lisa.
Thank you very much. I did not have time to prepare a video today, so you'll just have to make do with my half-dozen or so PowerPoint slides, and I'll try and say some intelligent, interesting things about business development, which is near and dear to my heart because since I started the firm and been an entrepreneur and a business owner, my philosophy has always been grow or die. One of the things that Airfoil has done over the years is to continually evolve our brand within our industry and with our clients. And we have done so just about every 3 years over the last 12 years. Our most current brand re-identification is to be positively impossible to ignore. This is how we try to present ourselves to new business prospects. And it also is the mantra or consulting mandate, if you will, that we use in our work with clients, which is all about competitive and brand differentiation. From the standpoint of our clients, what influences our growth strategy is always a careful balance of what our clients are facing, and in the technology industry, which is our main area of focus, it's a lot about competition, innovation, and continually evolving technologies and doing things better than the competition. So we try and balance our clients' needs to move very quickly, and many of them, such as Microsoft, which is our largest account, is always in the process of introducing products. So client needs need to come first, but we also know that our own growth strategy is important as well. And our growth strategy is to grow about $1 million a year over the next 3 years according to our strategic plan. In order to do that, we know that we need to drive enough profits to continue to invest about $350,000 a year in US dollars in our own marketing and business development. One thing that is really resonating, and we'll talk about on this panel today, I'm sure, is meeting client expectations. And in talking to new business prospects, meeting client expectations begins with the first initial encounter with that new client prospect. And this really becomes an ongoing process about negotiation. And we encourage our teams in the sales process to go through a very thorough negotiation with our clients in 7 main areas. And the first one is to define organizational and business goals. And there are really only 3, sales, reputation, or some kind of cost efficiency or organizational objective. And we encourage our client teams to have our clients pick one. And as a subset of that overall campaign objective, to negotiate metrics very discreetly and very specifically according to awareness outcomes, understanding preference, understanding and advocacy in return. So this is one way in which we are looking to set and negotiate budgets from the very beginning, and know that this is an ongoing cycle. But negotiation is the key to getting a fair budget and to be able to have an ongoing conversation with the client when things may get in the way or change. Talent is a huge piece of a growing public relations firm, as we've just discussed. One thing that we are doing more and more of is utilizing personality profiling tools, services, and just our own intuition to make sure that our people have 2 key aspects of their personality that are really hardwired into their DNA. The first one is a service orientation. You can't teach somebody that. And the second one is either an innate sales ability or the ability to become a good salesperson, which I believe anybody can be a good salesperson. From a client standpoint, I think the one success characteristic for a client with an agency is mutual accountability. And going back to the conversation that I just had about metrics, this is really about setting metrics and setting an expectation that both the client and the agency are mutually accountable to reaching certain program challenges. When I talk about new business development, I like to think about our client eBay that we've been working with since 2004, and how we have transformed our work with eBay over 8 years of time to move through different areas of budget within the organization. So we began working with them in the corporate communications realm. Our budget came mostly from that area and those purchasing decision makers. More of our budget started to come from marketing communications and salespeople in the online marketplaces that around which eBay is structured. And now most of our budget comes from branding. So I think also a key to new business development is knowing where your budgets are coming from now and where they will come on in the future. And finally, succeeding with clients is, as I think Christine said earlier, focusing on adding value every step of the way.
Lisa, thank you very much. I mean, that's 3 great agencies talking about how they see themselves. I'm going to ask Kathy to talk now. From the point of view as much of the client as the agency, not belonging to an individual agency. Kathy, tell us about how you're helping clients to evaluate agencies.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Julian. My name is Kathy Cripps, and I'm the president of the Council of Public Relations Firms, which is the trade association in the U.S. that represents the public relations agencies. So we have about 106 agencies that are members, and many of you have trade associations in your own countries, and hopefully they're a valuable resource to you. So what we try to do for our members is help with some of the metrics around new business and business development and creation. But also we know from discussions with our member firms that the whole new business process has been become very cumbersome. Clients are challenging. RFPs are certainly something, if many of you participate in them, you know that they can be very onerous. So one of the things that we created as the voice of the agencies in the US is something that we call the RFP Builder. So as an organization that helps provide services to improve, to show that the PR firms are strategic business partners, certainly new business, a lot of the clients are looking at the firms and not necessarily approaching them in a way that's the best situation for the agencies. So this RFP Builder is a tool that clients can use, and we encourage any agency that knows that a client is putting an RFP together or an RFI, we encourage them to go to the website. It's a free tool that can be used. So what it is, and you can see there's a tutorial on there. If you go onto the site, there's a tutorial that steps you through how to use it. So basically, it shows you the best process, putting together a timeline, what questions to ask, and then in this case, it directs you to agencies, which is the list of council member firms. And once they've put in their requirements, they can then put a pre-selected list of firms based on either city or size of firm or the kind of specialty firm that they might be looking for. So it's a very simple tool, and again, it's hopefully designed to encourage best practices among clients by putting together a reasonable RFP. And you can see on the left-hand side, it provides a checklist, so it steps them through each process in creating an RFP that's reasonable, that provides a reasonable timetable for the agencies, that encourages them to provide information that will actually help the agencies respond to their request for information. And you can see that in this next slide. So this is where they would enter their own specific information, what objectives they're looking to meet, what they're hoping that the agencies will provide. So it's a very simple tool, and it's just one of the resources that as the trade association we make available to anyone in the world who might be interested in using such a tool. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other things that we provide as tools to not only our council members, but around the world, any organizations that want to turn to our site, because we feel that the agencies deserve respect from prospective clients, and if they, this is one of my soap operas, soapbox, the idea that you're asked for so much information from prospective clients, and hopefully if you can help manage the information they're looking for so that it's reasonable for you to respond to their requests, it'll be a more mutually beneficial relationship for everyone. So we can talk more about some of the other tools later. Thank you.
Great. Kathy, can I just ask, I mean, is that tool available for anybody, or is it intended for US agencies? Can other people?
Anyone can use it. And so any client that's looking to put together a request can use it. At the end, if it says, what you want to put a list of client firms together, it would be just council member firms, but the client, any country that wanted to use the tool itself could certainly use the basis, the questions, the timetable, that kind of thing. So that's available to anybody.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
I guess what I'd maybe like to do now is try and delve behind some of the criteria to see if we feel as a group there's a change in the relative importance of different criteria. And Paul phrased it quite well in the little blurb he wrote about it. What is really driving it? Driving agency choice? Is it excellence, or is it increasingly cost efficiency? Who is really driving the agency choice? Is this the CEO, the CMO, the Chief Communication Officer, or is procurement an important part of the mix? And I'm wondering whether there are different experiences from countries like Brazil or India, which are still growth economies, or regions like Europe or the US, where growth is much more challenging. Kathy, I might ask you to start that off. What's your overall view of the trend in the States?
Yeah, I'd love to start that because one of the things we do is survey our members quarterly. We do quick surveys. We try to get a snapshot of what's happening. So certainly quality is important, but I also feel, and based on our most recent survey, we asked the agencies, how important are integrated services? And nearly 80% indicated that the clients are looking for more integrated services. So I think it's changing the face of what the agencies are providing, and so certainly being able to provide a variety of services, maybe outside the scope of what you had done in the past, and then communicating to the clients that you are able to provide more widespread, more spectrum of services is a key. So I think that's a big trend that clients are looking to the firms to provide.
Yeah, I'm not going to let the panel off the hook here about cost efficiency and procurement. I'd like to ask Nitin and Eduardo. We hear a lot about this in the US and Europe. Are you judged by procurement, or are you judged by the person who's going to be running the campaign?
I think in India it's still, I would say about 70-80% new business is still determined by the people who run the campaign. But increasingly, larger pitches and global organizations are starting to follow the same procurement system they probably follow in the US and Europe. And they're increasingly doing that in India as well. But I still think the weightage there is still much lower than it would be in the US, I would think. So it's still the COPCOM, the CEO, who's driving, I would say, decision making.
Yeah, in Brazil it's almost the same. I believe the procurement guys, they are definitely part of the process. But who signed the check, the paycheck, it's the CEO or the Global Communications Director, which comprehends corporate affairs and PR and government relations and everything. And in probably the rest of the cases, it will be the CMO.
Lisa, what do you find in the States? Is procurement not the big bad kind of ogre that it's sometimes set out to be? I remember sitting listening to Martin Sorrell and Keith Weed of Unilever kind of saying, you're destroying our business, Mr. Weed, by putting your procurement people onto our agencies all the time. Are we finding this as well?
Well, my attitude toward procurement has changed dramatically over the last several years. And I used to, as a hyper-competitive, rather prideful business owner, look down my nose at RFPs and saw them as a kind of a big hassle. And then about 5 years ago, we started getting on the radar of Microsoft's procurement. And this has done remarkable things for our business from a services standpoint and a strategy and differentiation standpoint. And we have actually learned a tremendous amount from Microsoft's procurement department. And we are getting more and more opportunities than we ever have. Also, several years ago, I don't know how, but we got on Nissan's radar to participate in an agency of record review. And we made it to the final round, but somebody higher up must have figured out that no one knows who Airfoil is because they asked us not to come the day before the presentation. But so 2 years later, we ended up on procurement's radar again and have received 3 RFPs from Nissan's procurement department. So this is, I think, an inevitable strategy for independent PR firms, regardless of your size. As far as who makes the decision, I think that procurement is involved in the process depending on the size and sophistication of the organization. But ultimately, and I really can say this with a 90% confidence, It's the relationship. If you have a relationship with a purchasing decision maker who's running the campaign, that is going to trump procurement most often.
Julian, I'd like to just add, since procurement is something we've been tracking, and it's something that's it is definitely involved in more and more of the business searches, we've started reaching out to other groups to try to understand procurement a little bit better. So, for example, there's an organization called the Association of National Advertisers, and it's made up primarily of clients. And they have a finance committee, and that's where their procurement discussions take place. And we've reached out to them and put together a task force and really tried to understand what some of the motivating factors are. And we've put together, we have a white paper on our website that's a great Q&A to use internally or as a discussion piece with clients. But just one anecdote that I thought was so interesting. In a lot of the discussions, they'll say, you know, well, the agencies will say, well, they're asking for such unreasonable requests. You know, they want these consolidated billing rates, and they're asking for really ridiculous information from us. So in our conversations with procurement, with our task force, we kind of relayed some of this information. And we said, well, you know, the agencies are feeling very stressed by some of the things that you're asking for. The procurement people, this is true, said, well, we ask, but the agencies don't push back. They just give us the information. So please, I offer that to you as a lesson. At least push back when they're asking, and when they're telling you that all the other agencies are giving them this information, that may or may not be true. So, you know, I think we sometimes make our own bed and then have to sleep in it. So the more you can question why they're asking for information, or be strong about not necessarily giving it, or offer other information or other trades, if you will, you know, I think you can hopefully develop a better relationship with procurement where they, you know, have more respect for what the agencies are offering.
No, that's great. And I actually want to move on a little bit to the other thing which you said, Kathy, when you're talking about the client side earlier, which is about the variety of the services that an agency can provide. One of the reasons I asked Andreas, who can't be here today, was because he's got a very well-established PR firm of 200 or so people, but he added an advertising agency to that. He added a design agency to that. He put them all together and reckoned that that, for him, is a major part of the future of his business strategy. So about 70% probably of the size of his business is what we would think of as PR, and the rest is advertising or design. I know Eduardo has a strong feeling about what an agency should be made up of, and called his agency Ideal because there was no other ideal agency in Brazil. What's in your agency, Eduardo?
Well, I think we try to put together a mix of tools. But the thing is, I believe clients, they are looking for three major things. The first one is a good strategy delivery, then measurable results, and the last thing that they are looking for is innovative tools. So we try to put together different tools such as advertising, social media, brand content, and PR, in a way that we can offer this for the clients, but not as a final result, just as a tool to get the results that they are achieving. It's interesting because it depends on the client, because I have a client actually, which was the marketing director for Nike in Brazil, and his strategy was very curious. He put together all the agencies in the same room, and he says, come on guys, everyone here is being paid by the same entity, which is Nike. Myself, my crew, and you guys from the agencies. So we have to work together and find out a way to integrate our thoughts and our strategies to get an achievable result. And so from my standpoint, I believe that when you can make an agency that can understand that and can offer a kind of services that can, address this feeling of the client, it's very good for everyone.
So the integration of the services towards the end result, it's much talked about. It can come from an agency leadership. It can come from a client leadership. Nitin, what's your kind of experience? Are the clients leading this? Are the agencies leading this? Or is it simply not happening where you are?
Well, it is. It is happening. And I think it's a mix of both. I think both the agency, where the agencies are recognizing that, especially digital, like Eduardo mentioned, even we've kind of integrated digital and things like government affairs, content, all together as offerings. And you talked about advertising earlier. While we not ventured into traditional advertising, but yes, when you get into digital, you get into online advertising. And that's something helped us get deeper into a client business as well. And for a client, it's become much easier taking integrated services from one agency.
Lisa, do you have the same experience, or?
As it relates to services, I think it's tremendously important to have a services strategy, and we reevaluate our services offering every time we do a 3-year strategic plan. Most recently, we have carved out social and digital offerings very specifically and are working to ensure that all of our 60-plus employees on the professional side are able to deliver on the promises that we're making from a services standpoint. Generally speaking, our agency identifies as a public relations firm, but once we get into the sales process and competing, we're differentiating based on marketing types of services because most of our clients' campaigns have a sales mandate of some kind. And on the marketing side of things, really it's, whatever our clients want us to be. I signed a check the other day for $300,000 to support an advertising buy that was being done. And it was just very, very fascinating that we are doing that. And it wasn't just a normal advertising buy, it was a digital ad buy for eBay. So I do think that generally speaking, if you looked at our agency as a whole, it's a rather confusing marketplace as it relates to services. I think we all have a lot of different proprietary services, and we have shared similar services, but it might make for an interesting conversation at some point. How do we make it easier for clients to buy from us from a more standardized set of services that we can differentiate?
And also, how do you make money from it, and are they expecting you to float that cash? I think it's a whole bit different business approach when you're getting into some of those other services.
Also, I think selling it in an integrated fashion is important, because just going back to the previous panel, I think it was one of the panelists, I think Fraser or Frederick mentioned that you still have a single P&L. And until you have all your teams understanding whether it's government affairs, whether it's media relations, whether it's digital, they understand it and can cross-sell and sell an integrated offering. That's going to be very critical.
Yeah, I think the clients, they're less worried about the tool that you are going to offer. Yeah. They're just worried about the results that you are going to provide. And so it's curious because we have to prepare ourselves to address this.
Yeah, I know, but people talk about results. But that's the other kind of theme that sits in my mind is how do you evaluate results? What are the metrics that your clients are using to evaluate the campaign, and what are the metrics that you feel they should be using? I mean, I still walk in and see many credentials presentations that talk about, equivalent advertising value gained through PR campaign, $125,000 or something like this. That's still said. I mean, are you using kind of metrics like this? Have you got different metrics, or has it just become a lot more judgmental?
Well, one thing, if you look at what some of the organizations that track these things, IPR, AMEC, advertising equivalents are not used. They shouldn't be used, and it's not the way that we are best evaluated. But I think the way firms are evaluated is changing and growing, and there's a lot of work being done in that area, but there's still a lot more that needs to be done. So maybe on the social media side, there are more metrics that you can track, but still, how do you communicate that best to clients? And if it's in a mixed campaign, and the clients are tracking and spending a lot of money on research, are you able to get some of that information from the clients? So you're not trying to, be responsible for all the measurement yourself.
Who else like to add? How are you evaluated? How do you measure your performance?
Well, I think in India it goes across the mix, to be honest. There are clients who still look at advertising value spends. Not only Indian clients, but actually global clients. So we work with I'm not going to name the country, but we do, we promote a country in India. And, for them, it's an advertising value of the PR versus the PR spend they make, which gets audited by the tourism ministry over there, and which determines budgets for them next year, including targets for next year. So it still happens, but then you have the other spectrum where you are doing more sophisticated analysis on message delivery, target reach, down to increase in sales and perceptions. So it's a mix.
Yeah, I think that this question has two answers. The first one is, yes, add value and publicity, they are very used for clients, a lot. They don't say that in a panel like that, but they use a lot. And the second answer is that I believe that PR is made for change behaviors and attitudes. And so our metrics are so, we work with several metrics, but one of them is increase of sales. And so when you put this on the table and you can show to your client that PR can be a sales generator and not just a cost for them, I think that you start to change the conversation, the tone of the conversation. So I believe the reality is one thing, but a lot of agencies, and I'm sure that a lot of agencies here, present here, they're working with total different metrics.
Yeah. I think we're probably quite short of time, but we maybe have time for one or two questions. Yes, I'm getting a nod. We've got another 5 minutes. So I'd like to ask if anybody would like to ask a question either to the panel as a whole or to any individual. And please do say who you are and your name and your company and your country as well. Please.
I'm Doug Ports again. I have a question that's particularly for Kathy. And that is that one of the criteria you ask in your RFP system is regarding what size agency the prospective client wants. How are you dealing with the issue of size in a world where more and more work is being outsourced to experts in specific niches, where before that talent may have existed inside the company and therefore contributed to size, but it may be much more efficient for that talent, world-class talent, to exist outside. So how do you deal with the issue of size in this changing world?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and it's really more about capabilities, isn't it, than size. And I think the reason that question was there when the RFP Builder was created had to do with something that we had heard from a lot of from our agencies, and that they might be involved in an RFP where a dozen agencies are selected, firms of all sizes, and at the end of the day, the client still picks the large firms. So why did they ask firms that were not large if they wanted a large firm? But it's really about capability, so it's a good point, and we should maybe just go back and look at that and see if there's some adaptation that needs to be made now that firms are providing capabilities in so many different ways. So it's a great point. Thanks.
Another question?
Balmania from FJ Communications in Madrid, in Spain. I guess it has to do with the question has to do with the challenge when it comes to changing when you're selling out yourself as an agency, as a PR specialist agency, and suddenly you're starting to do so many other things. How do you manage to do that, in a way that the client, the prospect out there believes that what you say is true, and you're gonna deliver on what you say without much experience, really?
Lisa.
Is the question, how do you establish credibility with clients to do things other than public relations? Well, on occasion, we're just quite honest about it and, say that based on the level of trust and the track record of success that we've had with the client, we'd like to do things a couple different ways. An example of that is I've been talking to our account teams recently about I'm desperately looking for a client who will test the U.S. Postal Service everyday direct mail campaign service, which is actually very amazing from a marketing strategy standpoint. The ability to hyper-target zip codes and individual homes. And so I've kind of put people out there, and we have a couple coming back. So, I mean, I think part of it is also having an entrepreneurial organization where you're giving people the effective authority to take managed risks, smart risks. One of our big bets this year as an agency is 5 successful failures. So we're looking for, 5 high-profile experiments, if you will. And if they work, great, but we aren't really going into it thinking that they will. And actually, this advertising buy was one of them. So I think a lot of it is you certainly wouldn't want to try a new service on a new client. You have to take a managed risk approach to it.
If I can add something, I think we're still doing PR. I mean, when you go to talk to your public through social networks, you're doing PR. When you go to create an advertising on Facebook that will dialogue or establish a dialogue between a lot of publics, you're doing PR. When you generate content for a brand that wants to, again, dialogue with their audiences, you're doing PR. I mean, it's not a difference in our work or the final, goal of our work. It's just new tools that came, so.
But I like what Lisa was saying, because even with us, when we started the digital practice, we tried it with a client who had worked with us for 6 years and they trusted us, and they said, okay, give it a shot, and since then we've just grown.
Time for one more? In that case, I'm going to ask one myself, and then we'll finish. And my question is about, because I'm intrigued by this, going back to new business. Do you still do new business the way that one always did, by establishing kind of a credibility and a contacts? Or do you use a lot of new techniques, social media, LinkedIn, targeted blogs? We all talk about social media a lot. Do we use it ourselves in our businesses? I'd just be curious to know where the panel stands on that.
Well, in our case, I think it's still the traditional way. It's still contacts, word of mouth. We've grown the word of mouth way, and we continue to do that. Yes, we are called for RFPs and pitches, but that's, again, we are called. Are we using social media, LinkedIn for new business? Not really. On a personal level, maybe, but not really.
I think credibility is everything.
Yeah.
So if you have it, then you can use any tool that you want to.
New business development for us is a good marketing strategy and a much better sales process. And the strategy is all about, in aligning your resources against a market that you think that where you can get more share and compete. But the sales process is really the day-to-day, hand-to-hand combat for developing relationships, and going to conferences and face-to-face networking is the best way to do that.
Julian, do you also mean how are the agencies selling their services? How are they presenting their ideas? I think one thing that's become more apparent is the idea of insights. So more research on the consumer's brand and challenge and competitive set to provide some insights when the presentation, when the capabilities or the new business presentation is taking place.
Terrific. I think that's a great answer, and it's several great answers across the the spectrum of this afternoon. I'd really like to thank all of our participants, both those who came a long way, those who stood in at very short notice, and those who shared some very useful and new knowledge and tools as well. So thank you very much. Please,
thank you very much.
Applause.